The rain hammered down like bullets on the cracked pavement, turning the city's forgotten corners into rivers of filth. Jax huddled deeper into his soaked green jacket, his fingers numb as he tore a moldy burger bun in half. One piece for him, one for Buster, his three-legged mutt who'd been his only family for the past 3 years on these merciless streets. "Here, boy," Jax whispered, his voice hoarse from the cold that had settled permanently in his chest. Buster's tail wagged as he gobbled down the stale bread, and for a moment, watching his dog's simple joy, Jax almost forgot how hungry he was. The canal stretched before them, dark and swollen from the storm. Jax had learned to avoid it. The current was vicious, and people said bodies turned up downstream every winter. But today, the overhang near the bridge offered shelter, and beggars couldn't be choosers. That's when he heard it. A child's laughter, bright and innocent, cutting through the rain like a bell. Jax looked up to see a little girl, maybe 8 years old, chasing a red balloon along the canal's edge. Her pink raincoat was too big for her, the sleeves covering her hands as she reached for the string dancing just beyond her fingertips. "Careful, kid," Jax called out, but his voice was lost in the storm. It happened so fast. The girl lunged for the balloon, her boots slipped on the wet concrete, and suddenly she wasn't on the embankment anymore. She was in the water, her scream cut short as the icy current dragged her under. Jax didn't think. His body moved before his brain could catch up, driven by something deeper than logic. He kicked off his boots and dove into the freezing canal. The cold hit him like a fist to the chest, crushing the air from his lungs. The current was a living thing, clawing at him, pulling him down into the murky darkness. He couldn't see anything, just churning brown water and debris, but he kicked harder, swept his arms wider, praying he'd find her. His hand struck something soft. The girl's jacket. He grabbed hold and pulled, fighting against the current that wanted to take them both. His lungs burned, screaming for air, but he kept kicking, kept pulling, kept fighting. When his head broke the surface, he gasped so hard his throat felt like it would tear. The girl was limp in his arms, her lips blue, her eyes closed. Jax's heart hammered with pure terror as he struggled toward the concrete embankment, the slippery wall offering no purchase. 3 times he tried to climb up with her. 3 times he slid back down. On the 4th attempt, his fingers found a crack in the concrete. He wedged his hand in, ignoring the pain as the sharp edge cut into his palm, and hauled himself and the girl up onto solid ground. She wasn't breathing. "No, no, no!" Jax panted, turning her on her side. He remembered something from a first aid poster he'd seen at a shelter years ago. He pressed on her back, once, twice, and suddenly water gushed from her mouth. She coughed, then gasped, her eyes fluttering open. Relief flooded through Jax so powerfully his arms shook. The girl looked up at him, confused and scared, but alive. So beautifully, impossibly alive. That's when he heard the thunder. Not from the sky, from the bridge above. The roar of motorcycle engines, dozens of them, a sound like Judgment Day approaching. Jax's head snapped up, and his blood turned to ice. Massive bikes lined the bridge, their riders clad in leather cuts bearing the winged Death's Head skull. Hell's Angels. Even from this distance, Jax could see the patches, could feel the weight of their presence crushing down on him. These weren't just bikers. They were the most feared motorcycle club in the city, maybe the world. The lead rider, a mountain of a man at least 6'5", dismounted and vaulted over the bridge railing with surprising agility. His boots hit the embankment like thunder, and when he opened his mouth, his voice was a roar that made Jax's bones shake. "Where is she? Who did this?" More angels poured down from the bridge, surrounding them, their faces twisted with rage. Jax's mind went blank with terror. He'd seen what happened to people who crossed the angels. Bodies in dumpsters. Faces you couldn't recognize. Warnings carved into flesh. "They think I pushed her." The thought slammed into Jax like a freight train. "They think I hurt her, and they're going to kill me." "Daddy!" the little girl cried, and that single word confirmed Jax's worst nightmare. This wasn't just any kid. This was their princess. The president's daughter. The massive biker's eyes locked onto Jack's, and in that gaze, Jack saw his own death approaching. He scrambled backward, his wet clothes making him clumsy, and grabbed Buster's collar. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the little girl, to the universe, to anyone who might listen. Then he ran. "Stop!" The president's voice boomed behind him, but Jax was already moving, his survival instinct overriding everything else. He knew these streets better than anyone. 3 years of running from cops, from gangs, from anyone who wanted to hurt someone who couldn't fight back had taught him every crack, every shadow, every escape route. He dove into the storm drain just as heavy footsteps pounded behind him. The darkness swallowed him, and he ran through the filthy water, Buster splashing beside him, his 3 legs working overtime to keep up. Behind him, he could hear the angels shouting, their voices echoing through the tunnel like the howls of demons. Jax didn't stop running until his lungs felt like they would burst and his legs threatened to give out. Only then did he collapse against the slimy wall, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. "We're dead, Buster," he whispered into his dog's wet fur. "We're so dead." Big Frank stood at the edge of the canal, holding his daughter wrapped in a leather jacket that swallowed her tiny frame. Lily was shivering but alive, coughing up the last of the canal water as club members called for ambulances and barked orders into radios. "Daddy, don't be mad at the ragged man," Lily said, her small voice breaking Frank's heart. "He saved me. He jumped in and pulled me out. He didn't let me go, even when the water was trying to take us away." Frank looked at the empty storm drain where his daughter's savior had disappeared. The kid had been terrified. Frank had seen it in his eyes. Not the fear of a guilty man, but the fear of someone who'd been hurt too many times, who'd learned to expect violence instead of gratitude. "He ran," Frank said quietly, more to himself than to Lily. "He was scared of you," Lily said matter-of-factly. "You were yelling really loud." Frank's jaw clenched. The kid had saved his daughter's life and then fled because he thought the angels were coming to hurt him. The thought made Frank's chest tight with a feeling he didn't want to name. Shame, maybe? Or guilt that the club's reputation had made a hero run for his life. He pulled his radio from his belt and keyed it, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a man who'd led the most powerful charter in the state for 15 years. "Listen up, all chapters, all prospects, all associates. We have a citywide operation, effective immediately. I want every member on the street. Find the kid in the green jacket, early 20s, thin, traveling with a 3-legged dog. Show his picture everywhere. Check every shelter, every soup kitchen, every squat in the city." He paused, making sure his next words were crystal clear. "Do not, and I mean do not, approach aggressively. This kid is a hero. He saved my daughter. When you find him, you treat him with respect and you bring him to me. Anyone who scares him or hurts him will answer to me personally. Are we clear?" A chorus of, "Yes, sir," crackled back through the radio. Frank looked down at Lily, who'd fallen asleep against his chest, exhausted from her ordeal. "We're going to find him, Princess," he murmured. "And we're going to make this right." Day 2 on the run, and Jax was convinced the entire city had become his prison. He crouched in an alley behind a Chinese restaurant, watching 3 angels question a homeless woman at the street corner. One of them held up a sketch, a rough drawing of Jax's face that was close enough to make his heart stop. Too close. "You see this guy, you call this number," the angel said, handing the woman a card. "There's a reward." "A reward?" Jax's hands shook as he pulled his hood lower. They were putting a price on his head. How much was he worth? How much did it cost to kill a homeless kid who'd made the mistake of touching the president's daughter? The woman shook her head, and the angel moved on, but Jax saw how he shoved past a businessman who didn't answer fast enough. The aggression in every movement, the barely controlled violence radiating from their leather cuts, it all confirmed what Jax already knew. They were hunting him, and when they found him, there would be no mercy. Buster whined softly, pressing against Jax's leg. The dog was hungry, they both were. Jax hadn't eaten in 2 days, too afraid to go anywhere near the soup kitchen or the shelters. Bikes were parked outside every single one, angels standing guard like sentries. "I know, boy," Jax whispered, scratching behind Buster's ears. "I'll figure something out." But figuring something out was getting harder. The fever from the canal water had settled into his bones, making him shake even when he wasn't cold. His vision blurred at the edges, and sometimes he forgot where he was, lost in memories of better times that felt like someone else's life. As darkness fell, Jax knew he had to make a move. Buster needed food more than Jax needed safety. In his pocket, he still had the silver ring he'd found in a dumpster last week, probably worth $20 if he could find someone to buy it. That would be enough for dog food, at least. There was only one place open this late that would take the ring without asking questions. Jenkins' pawn shop, down on Mercy Street where even cops didn't like to go. Jax waited until the streets were empty, then moved through the shadows like a ghost. Jenkins' shop glowed with sickly yellow light, bars on the windows and a closed sign hanging crooked on the door. But Jax knew Jenkins lived upstairs. A few knocks would bring him down. He was halfway across the street when he saw it, a motorcycle parked 2 blocks down, its rider smoking a cigarette and watching the intersection. Another angel. Jax's heart hammered, but he'd come too far to turn back. He slipped around to the alley entrance, where a service door led to Jenkins' back room. 3 sharp knocks, a pause, then 2 more. The signal Jenkins demanded from anyone who wanted to do business after hours. The door cracked open, and Jenkins' ratty face appeared, his eyes narrowing when he saw Jax. "Well, well," Jenkins said, his voice oily and mean. "Ain't you popular these days?" Jax's stomach dropped. "I don't know what you're talking about. I just want to sell this ring." "Save it, kid." Jenkins pulled the door open wider, revealing the baseball bat in his other hand. Behind him, Jax could see a sketch of his own face pinned to the wall, the same sketch the angels were distributing. "Bikers came by earlier, showing that picture around. Said they're looking for some homeless punk. Offering $5,000 to anyone who brings you in." $5,000. Jax's mind reeled. That kind of money would change Jenkins' life. Would change anyone's life. "I didn't do anything wrong," Jax said, backing up, but Jenkins was already moving. "Don't care what you did or didn't do," Jenkins sneered. $5,000 is $5,000, and a broke punk like you ain't worth more than the payday you're bringing me." The bat came down fast. Jax threw up his arm and felt the impact shatter through his bones, sending him sprawling backward. Pain exploded up his shoulder, white-hot and blinding. Buster barked and lunged, his teeth finding Jenkins' ankle, and the pawnshop owner howled. "Goddamn mutt!" Jenkins kicked at Buster, but the dog dodged, still barking furiously. Jax scrambled to his feet, his arm hanging useless at his side, and did the only thing he could do. He ran. Through the back alley, over a chain-link fence that tore his jacket, down 3 blocks without looking back. His lungs burned, his arms screamed, and his vision swam with black spots. When he finally collapsed behind an abandoned textile factory, Buster licking his face anxiously, Jax knew he couldn't run much longer. The fever was worse, spreading through him like poison. His arm was swelling, possibly broken. And the angels were everywhere, tightening the noose around the city. "Just a little longer," he told Buster, though he wasn't sure if he believed it anymore. "Just hold on a little longer, boy." Day 3 brought the storm. Lightning split the sky open, thunder rolling across the city like God's own anger. The rain came down in sheets, flooding the gutters and turning the streets into rivers. Jax huddled in the shell of the old textile factory, his fever burning so hot he could barely tell the difference between his shaking and the thunder that rattled the building's bones. He'd found a corner with part of the roof still intact, keeping the worst of the rain off. Buster curled against him, sharing what little warmth they had left. Jax's arm had swollen to twice its normal size, purple and black, and he knew infection had set in. Every breath hurt. Every heartbeat felt like his last. "I'm sorry, Buster," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. I'm sorry I got us into this. I should have just let her drown. Should have walked away. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. He could never have walked away. That little girl's life was worth more than his had ever been. Buster's head snapped up suddenly, his ears perked. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Then Jax heard it too. Engines. Lots of them. Growing closer. Lights swept across the factory windows, bright as searchlights, cutting through the darkness. The roar of motorcycles surrounded the building from all sides, a coordinated assault with no escape routes left open. This is it, Jax said, pulling Buster close. This is how it ends. The factory doors exploded inward, kicked off their rusted hinges. Flashlights blazed into Jax's eyes, blinding him, making him throw up his good arm to shield his face. Boots pounded across the concrete floor, heavy and purposeful, echoing in the cavernous space. Through the glare, Jax saw him. The president. Big Frank. He was even more terrifying up close, 6'5" of pure muscle and leather, his face weathered and hard, his eyes shadowed under heavy brows. Behind him, dozens of angels filled the factory, forming a wall of leather and patches that blocked every exit. Jax wanted to run, but his body had nothing left. He could barely stay conscious, let alone fight or flee. So he did the only thing he had left. He raised his hands, both of them, even though his broken arms sent lightning bolts of agony through his entire body, and he spoke through cracked, bleeding lips. I didn't push her, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I swear to God I didn't push her. I couldn't let her drown. I'm sorry I touched her. I'm sorry I ran. But please, his voice broke. Please don't kill the dog. He didn't do anything wrong. Just leave him alone. Silence fell across the factory, broken only by the rain hammering on what remained of the roof. The angels stared at Jax like he'd grown a second head. Some of them exchanged confused glances. A few shifted uncomfortably. Big Frank took a step forward, and Jax flinched despite himself. But the massive biker didn't strike. Instead, he did something that made absolutely no sense. He dropped to his knees. The president of the Hells Angels, a man who commanded respect through fear and power, who'd built an empire on the back of his reputation, knelt in the dirty water pooling on the factory floor and lowered his head to Jax's level. Son, Frank said, and his voice was gentle. Impossibly, incomprehensibly gentle. Nobody is gonna hurt you. Nobody is gonna hurt your dog. We've been looking for you for 3 days, and it wasn't to kill you. It was to thank you. Jax's mind couldn't process the words. They didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. You saved my daughter's life, Frank continued, his voice thick with emotion. Lily told us everything. How you dove in without hesitation. How you fought the current. How you got her breathing again. You're a hero, kid. And we've been tearing this city apart trying to find you so we could tell you that. But you were yelling, Jax stammered. You were so angry. I was terrified, Frank said simply. My little girl almost drowned. When I saw you on that embankment, I didn't understand what had happened yet. I thought. Hell, I don't know what I thought. But Lily set me straight the second she could talk. She said, Daddy, the ragged man saved me. He jumped in the water even though he was scared. He held on to me and didn't let go. Frank reached out slowly, giving Jax time to pull away, and gripped his shoulder. You ran because you thought we were coming to hurt you. But kid, we were coming to help you. And we've been chasing you ever since, trying to make you understand that. Jax felt something break inside his chest, something that had been holding him together through years of sleeping rough, of being beaten and spat on and treated like garbage. Tears burned in his eyes, and he didn't have the strength to stop them from falling. I don't understand, he whispered. You will, Frank said. He stood and held out his hand. Come on. Let's get you out of the cold. Let's get that arm looked at. And let's get some food in you and that brave little dog of yours. Jax stared at the offered hand like it was a foreign object. No one had offered to help him in 3 years. No one had called him brave. No one had looked at him like he was worth saving. Slowly, trembling, he reached out and took Frank's hand. The Hells Angels clubhouse was nothing like Jax had imagined. He'd pictured a torture chamber, a place of blood and screaming. Instead, he found himself in a building that felt more like a fortress, solid, secure, and warm. So blessedly warm after 3 days in the cold. They'd sat him at the head of a massive wooden table, and Jax kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. For someone to reveal this was all a cruel joke before the real punishment began. But instead they brought food. Mountains of it. Steaks still sizzling from the grill. Burgers stacked 3 high. Fries piled in baskets. Mac and cheese that steamed and smelled like heaven. A prospect, young guy maybe Jax's age, set a bowl of prime beef on the floor for Buster, who attacked it with the enthusiasm of a dog who'd been starving for days. "Eat," Frank said, settling into the chair beside Jax. "You look like a stiff wind could knock you over." Jax stared at the food, his stomach cramping with need, but his hands shook too badly to pick up the fork. A woman, someone's old lady, based on the property patch on her cut, noticed and gently cut the steak into pieces for him, like he was a child. "It's okay, honey," she said softly. "You're safe now." Safe. The word was foreign. Jax couldn't remember the last time he'd felt safe. He took a bite of the steak, and the flavor exploded across his tongue, rich and savory and perfect. Before he knew it, he was eating like a man possessed, shoveling food into his mouth so fast he barely tasted it. No one laughed at him. No one commented. They just kept the plates coming. Halfway through his 3rd burger, the clubhouse door burst open and a pink blur shot across the room. "You came!" Lily cried, launching herself at Jax with enough force to nearly knock him off his chair. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and she squeezed tight. "I knew Daddy would find you. I told him you were nice, that you saved me, but you ran away before I could say thank you." Jax froze, his arms suspended awkwardly, not sure what to do. He'd never been hugged by a kid before. Had barely been touched at all in years, except in violence. "It's okay," Lily said, sensing his discomfort. She pulled back and beamed at him, her smile bright enough to light the whole room. "You don't have to be scared anymore. The angels protect their family, and your family now." Around the table, bikers nodded. Grizzled men with scars and tattoos and hard faces, all looking at Jax with something that might have been respect. "The kid's right," said a massive biker they called Hammer. He stood and extended his hand. "You saved the princess. That makes you good in this town forever. Anyone messes with you, they mess with the whole club." One by one, the angels lined up to shake Jax's hand. Each one introduced themselves, told him if he ever needed anything, all he had to do was call. By the time the last one finished, Jax's head was spinning. I don't understand why you're doing this," he finally managed. Frank leaned back in his chair, studying Jax with eyes that had seen everything the world had to offer and somehow still found reasons to be surprised. "You dove into a freezing canal to save a kid you didn't know," Frank said. "You risked your life without thinking twice. That's character, son. That's honor. And honor is what this club is built on. We take care of our own, and we never forget a debt." "But I'm nobody," Jax whispered. "I'm just. You're somebody who matters," Frank interrupted firmly. "And don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you different." Frank's eyes narrowed as he noticed the fresh bruises blooming across Jax's face, the way his broken arm hung in the makeshift sling someone had fashioned. Speaking of which, those bruises didn't come from the canal. The water didn't do that. Who did? Jax hesitated. Snitching went against everything he'd learned on the streets. But something in Frank's expression, the quiet fury building behind his eyes, told Jax this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. "Guy named Jenkins," Jax said quietly. "Runs a pawn shop on Mercy Street. I went there to sell a ring, get food for Buster. He He saw the sketches you guys were passing around. Thought there was a reward. He tried to catch me, turn me in. Frank's face went absolutely cold. Not hot anger, but the kind of icy rage that was far more dangerous. He stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound like a death knell. Boys, Frank said, his voice carrying across the clubhouse. We have one more stop to make tonight. Jenkins was counting the day's take when he heard the motorcycles. At first, he thought nothing of it. Bikes were common in this neighborhood. But as the sound grew louder, multiplying, surrounding his shop from all sides, cold dread settled in his gut. He peered through the barred windows and felt his bladder nearly let go. Dozens of Hell's Angels surrounded his shop, their bikes forming an impenetrable wall. And walking up to his front door, Big Frank himself, flanked by his top officers. The door didn't just open, it exploded inward, torn off its hinges like it was made of cardboard. Jenkins scrambled backward, holding up his hands. I didn't do nothing. Whatever you think I did. You beat a kid half to death, Frank said, his voice quiet. Deadly quiet. A kid we were looking for. A kid under our protection. I didn't know, Jenkins squeaked. I heard there was a reward. There was a reward, Frank confirmed. $5,000 for anyone who found him and brought him to us safely. You heard reward and decided to play bounty hunter. Beat him with a baseball bat. Tried to sell him like a piece of meat. Frank stepped closer, and Jenkins could smell the leather, the gasoline, the danger radiating from the massive biker. The kid you beat saved my daughter's life, Frank continued. He's under the protection of the Hell's Angels now. Which means anyone who hurts him, hurts us. Please, Jenkins begged, tears streaming down his face. Please, I'm sorry, I didn't know. You're right about one thing, Frank said. You didn't know. But you're going to learn. What happened next wasn't murder. The Angels weren't stupid enough to kill someone in cold blood. But by the time they left Jenkins' pawnshop, the man had lost everything. His inventory was repossessed and donated to local shelters. His safe was emptied, the money going to pay medical bills for people Jenkins had gouged over the years. And Jenkins himself was given a simple choice: leave town within 24 hours, or find out what happened to people who hurt the Angels' family. Jenkins chose to leave. As the Angels rode away from the pawnshop, Frank couldn't help but smile. Justice had been served. Not perfect, maybe. Not legal. But right. 1 month later, Jax barely recognized himself in the mirror. The gaunt, hollow-eyed homeless kid was gone, replaced by someone who looked almost healthy. His hair was cut and clean. His face had filled out from regular meals. The fever had broken after 3 days of antibiotics, and his arm, properly set and casted by a doctor the Angels paid for, was healing well. He stood in his apartment, a one-bedroom place the club owned and let him live in rent-free, and still couldn't quite believe it was real. He had a bed, a bathroom with hot water, a refrigerator stocked with food that he didn't have to steal or scavenge. Come on, Buster, he said, clipping a new leather collar around his dog's neck. Time for our walk. They headed out into the evening air, comfortable and familiar now. Jax had a job, apprentice mechanic at the Angels' legitimate garage. He was learning to rebuild bikes, to understand engines, to create something instead of just surviving. The work was hard, but honest. And the guys at the shop treated him like he belonged. As Jax walked Buster through the neighborhood, people nodded to him. Not with pity or disgust, but with respect. Word had spread about what he'd done, about how the Hell's Angels had claimed him as family. In this part of town, that meant something. A familiar roar of engines made Jax look up. Big Frank rode past on his custom Harley, Lily riding in a sidecar beside him. The little girl waved enthusiastically, and Jax waved back, a genuine smile crossing his face. Frank slowed to a stop, killing his engine. How's the arm? Better every day, Jax said, flexing his fingers. Doc says another month and I can lose the cast. Good. Hammer says you're a natural with the bikes. Says you might have a real future as a mechanic. Pride swelled in Jax's chest, an unfamiliar but welcome feeling. I'm trying. You're doing more than trying, Frank said. He reached into his cut and pulled out a small leather patch, not a full member patch, but a supporter patch that read, Friend of the club. This is for you. You've earned it. Jax took the patch with trembling hands. It was just a piece of leather and thread, but it meant everything. It meant he mattered. It meant he belonged. Thank you, he whispered. Frank nodded, his expression gruff but warm. Thank you, kid. For saving my girl. For being brave when you had every reason to be scared. For showing me that sometimes the best people are the ones the world tries hardest to forget. As Frank rode away, Lily waving until they turned the corner, Jax stood in the fading sunlight and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Buster pressed against his leg, tail wagging, and Jax scratched behind his ears. We made it, boy, he said softly. We actually made it. He stopped running from the shadows the day the monsters turned out to be angels. And in learning to trust again, in accepting that maybe, just maybe, he deserved to be saved, Jax found something more valuable than any reward money. He found home.